On Thanksgiving Day in 2022, a heartbreaking tragedy unfolded at the Albuquerque home of Carlin and Connie DeNeo. Carlin, a gentle and soft-spoken man who by all accounts would never hurt a fly, had been battling frontotemporal dementia, a degenerative brain disease that slowly erodes a person's sense of reality and control. In the weeks leading up to the incident, he'd been waking up in the middle of the night in a state of deep anxiety and confusion, often unable to recognize where he was or what was happening. On that devastating holiday morning, family members arrived to find Connie's body dismembered and Carlin severely injured from self-inflicted wounds. Though he admitted to the murder, it was painfully clear that he wasn't in his right mind, lost in the fog of a cruel illness that had taken over his thoughts and stripped him of reason. Friends and loved ones were left shattered, knowing this wasn't the man they knew, but the heartbreaking consequence of a disease that claimed them both. Carlin was taken into custody and charged with murder, but his health rapidly declined. Just 3 weeks later, he died in medical care. His final days spent in confusion, grief, and the fading remnants of a once peaceful life. Once Hollywood's ultimate action hero, Bruce Willis is now trapped in a devastating real-life decline. In 2022, he was diagnosed with aphasia, a disorder that stripped him of the ability to understand or speak language. And by 2023, his family revealed that it was the early stage of frontotemporal dementia, a rare and brutal brain disease that erodes memory, personality, and communication until the patient no longer recognizes their loved ones. On film sets before his retirement, Willis was already struggling. He needed lines fed through an earpiece, often forgot entire scenes, and at times fired prop guns without warning, all while being pushed into low-budget cameos that cashed in on his fading star power. Now at just 69, the man who once embodied invincibility in Die Hard is slowly being undone by his own brain, unable to even grasp that he was once one of Hollywood's most iconic stars, while his family prepares for the cruel reality of watching one of the most charismatic voices in cinema fall silent forever. In August of 2023, Lil Tay's Instagram suddenly announced that she and her brother had died, sparking worldwide shock online. But within a day, she appeared alive, calling the post a cruel hack. Meta confirmed her account had been compromised, but suspicions lingered. Tay publicly accused her estranged father of planting the hoax, while others believe her brother staged it for attention. Then in 2024, she revealed that she'd been diagnosed with an actual life-threatening heart tumor and underwent successful open heart surgery, posting photos from her hospital bed. In 1978, 22-year-old art student Harold Brown fell 324 feet, nearly 30 stories, through the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco after crawling into a ventilation shaft. A guard who witnessed the fall swore he heard Brown yelling "whoopee" on the way down, as if enjoying the plunge. Against all odds, Brown survived the impact on the concrete base with both legs shattered, kneecaps destroyed, and a crushed heel bone, but no internal injuries. Minutes later, he regained consciousness and shocked rescuers by singing Camptown Races as they carried him out. In July of 2024, Carol Hunt, the wife of BBC racing commentator John Hunt, and their two daughters Louise and Hannah were brutally killed inside their own home in England by Louise's ex-boyfriend Kyle Clifford. Armed with a butcher knife and a crossbow, Clifford first stabbed 61 Carol to death at the front door, then waited for Louise, whom he restrained, raped, and held captive for over 2 hours before killing her with the crossbow. Minutes later, Hannah arrived home only to be shot as well. Fatally wounded, she still managed to raise the alarm before collapsing in the doorway. Clifford then fled and turned the bow on himself, surviving but left paralyzed. In 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of the murders and rape. The crime devastated the remaining Hunt family. John and his daughter Amy were left to grieve 3 women described as kind, joyful, and compassionate, while Clifford, once welcomed into their lives, exposed himself as nothing more than a violent predator. 26-year-old streamer Natalie Reynolds became widely hated across the internet after convincing a homeless woman to jump into Austin's Lady Bird Lake despite knowing she couldn't swim.
There's a scanner that you need to look for in the water.
Really?
Yeah.
What if I drown?
Then
I haven't been in the water. What is
you said you want to jump in.
I do kind of want to jump in. Huh? Oh,
And I'm scuba.
jump in with my sandals
I'm
on.
scuba certified. You should jump in.
All right.
When the woman started screaming for help and nearly drowned, Reynolds laughed and fled the scene instead of helping and never called 911.
She says she's drowning. We leave.
Oh, this is bad.
Dude, Natalie. Dude, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She said she's drowning. She says she's drowning.
I think you literally just murdered a lady.
No, I didn't. I swear.
I think you
No, I didn't. Let's go. Dude, she's drowning in the lake.
Firefighters had to dive in and pull the woman from the water as she thrashed and sank, just moments away from dying right in front of them. Reynolds later denied encouraging the jump, dismissed the backlash as overblown, and arrogantly told her followers it would blow over within a week, while even joking about getting clout from the drama on a private stream. The internet erupted with fury, calling her a heartless, fame-hungry sociopath who treats suffering as entertainment, cementing her reputation as one of the most despised streamers online. In 2015, 19-month-old Jazira Thompson was left home in Houston with her two 3-year-old siblings while their mother and her boyfriend went out for pizza. During the 2 hours they were gone, one sibling stuffed her into the oven and the other turned it on. When the couple returned, the two older children were frantic and crying in the kitchen, pointing to the oven and babbling in panic. In the chaos, the appliance had tipped over onto its side, preventing the small children from lifting it to free her. Inside, Jazira's small body was curled up, with burn patterns showing she'd been alive when the heat began. Her legs and feet blistered from pressing against the hot metal, and scuff marks on the door where she desperately kicked to escape. She eventually died from full-thickness burns and shock before help had any chance of arriving. The mother, Raquel Thompson, and her boyfriend Cornelius Williams were arrested and charged with 4 counts of child endangerment. Both faced up to 20 years in prison for leaving the young children unsupervised in a house full of hazards. China's developing a humanoid robot that can carry a fetus in an artificial womb, where the baby would float in synthetic fluid, sustained by nutrient tubes and monitored by sensors, before being expelled by hydraulics at birth. The first prototype is planned for 2026, priced around $14,000, and will give people the chance to have children without enduring the risks or pain of pregnancy. Supporters argue it could help women who can't safely carry babies, but critics warn it strips away the human bond of gestation and could mark the beginning of childbirth being outsourced to machines. In 1988, Clarence Moses L. was sentenced to 48 years in prison after a rape victim told police that she saw his face in a dream and decided that he was the attacker. No physical evidence tied him to the crime, and police even destroyed the DNA that could have proven his innocence. For nearly 3 decades, he sat behind bars while the real rapist walked free until that man finally confessed. But by then, Clarence had already lost 28 years of his life to a conviction built on nothing more than a dream. YouTuber Benjamin Bennett built a cult following with his Eerie project Sitting and Smiling. Hundreds of 4-hour videos where he sits cross-legged, staring at the camera with a fixed grin, never moving or speaking. What starts as harmless quickly turns unsettling, the smile morphing into something more of a mask. His commitment over the years has produced some rather disturbing moments. In one recording, someone apparently tries to break into his home, but Bennett continues to grin without moving, sending the intruder fleeing in fear. In another, he loses control of his bladder midstream but still doesn't break character, letting the accident happen as though it were irrelevant to the ritual. In perhaps the most disturbing case, he allegedly kept filming while his grandmother lay dying in the next room, the fixed smile never faltering even as tragedy was unfolding in his own home. He's never once broken character or explained why he does this, leaving behind thousands of hours of unsettling footage that's disturbed viewers online for years. LeVar Ball, father of NBA stars Lonzo and LaMelo, nearly died in early 2025 after a diabetic infection in his foot spread to his bloodstream. Multiple surgeries followed, first removing toes, then his foot, and finally amputating his leg below the knee along with 4 blood transfusions. At one point, he was in so much pain that he told his doctors to let him die, but his sons pushed him to fight. Now he uses the ordeal to warn others about ignoring symptoms and the dangers of unmanaged diabetes. In 2017, 25-year-old Akbar Salubiro suddenly vanished after harvesting palm oil in a remote Indonesian village. The next day, locals found a 23-foot-long reticulated python nearby with an unnaturally swollen belly. Fearing the worst, they cut the snake open and pulled out Akbar's fully clothed body still intact. Experts believe the snake ambushed him as he was walking home, constricted him to death, and swallowed him whole because he was alone in a forested area where large prey was scarce. It was the first confirmed and fully documented case of a human being swallowed whole by a python, with graphic photos and videos of the recovery sparking worldwide horror. In 2018, a woman who'd been in a vegetative state for 14 years at Hacienda Healthcare gave birth unexpectedly, as staff had no idea she was even pregnant. DNA evidence later revealed she'd been raped by a nurse over several years. The nurse, Nathan Sutherland, pled guilty to sexual assault and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The case led to widespread reforms in how care facilities protect vulnerable patients. In April of 2024, 10-year-old Dakota Levi Stevens of Indiana died when his 340-pound foster mother, Jennifer Lee Wilson, pinned him to the floor with her whole body weight for 5 minutes as discipline. As Dakota screamed while gasping for air, she accused him of faking until he went limp, only then attempting CPR. Wilson was sentenced to 6 years in prison for reckless homicide, while it later emerged that Dakota had begged his neighbor to adopt him, saying his foster parents were abusive. John Jessup, a once respected politician in Indiana, did the unspeakable to his own daughter while celebrating her 21st birthday in Las Vegas. The former Hancock County Commissioner pleaded guilty to attempted sexual assault after allegedly getting his daughter extremely drunk before assaulting her back at their hotel. Prosecutors say Jessup provided her with multiple Long Island iced teas, took her to a strip club where she became so incapacitated she needed a wheelchair ride back to the hotel, and later assaulted her while she was unconscious. He was sentenced in 2025 to 6 to 25 years in prison, must register as a sex offender, and is barred from all contact with his daughter for life. Carlos Haffy Rodriguez was ejected through a windshield in a drug-fueled crash as a teenager, smashing his skull so badly that surgeons had to remove the entire upper half of it, leaving his brain covered only by skin. Incredibly, he survived without any severe cognitive damage, but went on to rack up arrests for drugs, arson, and other crimes, his caved-in head becoming one of the internet's most infamous mugshots. Here's a photo of tobacco company CEOs declaring under oath that nicotine is not addictive. The moment became infamous when internal documents later revealed that tobacco executives had known for decades about nicotine's highly addictive properties and had even manipulated nicotine levels in cigarettes to enhance dependency. In 18th century Europe, the wealthy often devoured sugar with no real dental care, rotting their teeth into black stumps that often fell out. To keep up appearances, they wore dentures, not wooden as legend claims, but often filled with real human teeth. These were bought from the poor, pulled from slaves or prisoners, or scavenged from battlefields, sometimes still bloody from fallen soldiers. With no concept of sterilization, they could carry infections, even syphilis, into the wearer's mouth. In advanced cases, the disease could slowly eat away at the face, collapsing the nose and leaving a grotesque hollow mask where features used to be. In 2005, 8-year-old Shasta Groen survived one of the most disturbing child abduction cases in U.S. history. A convicted predator invaded her family's rural Idaho home, killing her mother, older brother, and her mother's boyfriend before kidnapping Shasta and her 9-year-old brother Dylan. For nearly 7 weeks, the children were held in the Montana wilderness, where Shasta endured unimaginable abuse and was forced to witness Dylan's murder. She was finally rescued when staff at Denny's recognized her from missing child alerts and contacted police, leading to her captor's arrest. While the man responsible eventually died in prison, he left behind some chilling words, claiming that Shasta had taught him how to love, a grotesque attempt to justify his heinous crimes. The trauma he inflicted left Shasta struggling for years with grief, addiction, and survivor's guilt, and as a young adult, she cycled in and out of jail on charges related to substance abuse and theft. In recent years, she's fought to reclaim her life, becoming a mother and speaking out about the ordeal, but fresh tragedies continue to haunt her, most recently losing her home and treasured family keepsakes in a fire, perpetuating her ongoing battle against the shadows of her past. In 2009, 25-year-old Matrice Richardson was arrested by Malibu police after failing to pay a dinner bill, then released just after midnight without her phone, wallet, or car. She then wandered into the mountains alone, reportedly in a state of mental distress. 11 months later, her skeletal remains were found in a canyon, her body bizarrely mummified in some areas but missing internal organs, and her clothes were scattered far from her body. Authorities insisted there was no foul play, but the condition of her remains and the decision to release her into the night remained deeply controversial. Rising French child actor and voice dubber Boris Roata was best known as the French voice of Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. But in August of 1994, at just 14 years old, he was struck by a car while cycling in the French Alps and killed instantly, cutting short a promising career that had only just begun. In 1901, outlaw Thomas Blackjack Ketchum was hanged in Clayton, New Mexico, the town's first ever execution. But with no prior experience, they miscalculated the rope length. When the trapdoor dropped, the force was so strong that it ripped his head clean off. His headless body dropped to the ground, and locals, rather unfazed, posed for postcards with the corpse, later turning the images into macabre souvenir postcards. Known for playing Donna's mom in That 70s Show, actress Tanya Roberts died from a severe UTI that advanced to sepsis and multi-organ failure. She first noticed the pain while out hiking one day and decided to sleep it off. But the next morning, Roberts fell out of bed in severe pain and couldn't get back up. She was quickly rushed to the hospital where she ended up dying 2 weeks later. In 2022, a 71-year-old cyclist named William Hoax was struck by an ambulance while riding his bike in Oregon, causing multiple injuries including a fractured nose. The same ambulance brought him to the hospital, but later followed up with a bill for $1,800 for the ride. Hoax has since filed a lawsuit seeking just under $1 million. After a night out in 2016, 23-year-old Royal Air Force gunner Corey McKeague suddenly vanished. Security footage showed him entering a street but never showed him exiting. Police eventually concluded that he fell asleep in a garbage bin and was crushed to death by a garbage truck. Corey's body was never found. In 2007, a 21-year-old man named Ben Carpenter, who suffers from muscular dystrophy, was pushed by a semi-truck for 4 miles after his wheelchair got stuck in the grill. Thankfully, officers heading in the opposite direction noticed the terrifying situation and stopped the driver before things got serious. Ben miraculously escaped without a scratch on him, but was traumatized by the incident. Grant Amato, a former nurse from Florida, was sentenced to life in prison in 2019 after murdering his parents and brother when they confronted him about stealing $200,000 of their money to fund his obsession with a Bulgarian cam girl. But even behind bars, his name resurfaced in a twisted new plot. In 2024, Victoria Goodwin, the wife of Ghost Adventures star Aaron Goodwin, fell in love with Amato after watching a documentary about his crimes and began messaging him from prison. But their conversations turned deadly when she confessed that she didn't want to divorce, but instead wanted her husband killed, pooling over $11,000 with Amato to hire a hitman and even sending him details of her husband's routine. The plot collapsed when prison officials intercepted Amato's phone, exposing the conspiracy and leading to Victoria's arrest in March of 2025. In court, Aaron Goodwin faced his wife who tried to have him assassinated, while Victoria, strangely enamored with a family-annihilating simp, was sentenced to several years in prison. During an SAS training exercise in 1996, 21-year-old Bear Grylls broke his back after falling 16,000 feet when his parachute failed to open. His surgeon wasn't sure if Grylls would ever walk again, but the survival expert climbed Mount Everest just 18 months later, becoming the youngest Brit to ever do it. Here's a photo of 13-year-old Barbara Kent and her fellow campers playing in a New Mexico river, just hours before the first atomic bomb was tested 40 miles away from them. Over the next few days, the area was covered in fallout flakes that the campers thought was snow, only it was hot instead of cold. The US government had selected the site for its supposed isolation, but in reality, thousands of people were within a 40-mile radius and weren't evacuated nor warned before the test. Despite being diagnosed with 4 different types of cancers throughout her life, Barbara was the only girl in the above photo who lived past the age of 30, somehow making it to 83. Known for his legendary role of Cousin Eddie in the National Lampoon's Vacation movies, American actor Randy Quaid has faced a bevy of legal issues over the years. In 2009, he and his wife Evie were arrested for allegedly using a fake credit card to pay a $10,000 hotel bill. The next year, the couple was arrested again after spending 5 days in a guest house on a property they once owned in Cali. Facing felony vandalism charges, they fled to Canada seeking asylum, claiming they were gonna be murdered by a group of Hollywood star whackers. The couple was later detained by Canadian immigration officials but eventually released. They now permanently reside in Burlington, Vermont, and still maintain that they were victims of a dark Hollywood conspiracy. During the 2014 filming of Muppets Most Wanted, Danny Trejo's mom suddenly passed away. The actor managed to hold it together when everyone on set gave him their condolences. But when Kermit the Frog offered his own sympathies, Trejo ran to the bathroom bawling his eyes out. An Italian mafia hitman named Edgardo Greco killed 2 mob rivals with a crowbar before fleeing to France. He went on the run for more than 30 years until he was discovered working as a prestigious pizza chef. Greco's food became so famous thanks to his homemade recipes that he was featured in the local newspaper, resulting in his cover being blown. In 1978, Sex Pistols bassist Sid Vicious and his girlfriend Nancy Spungen hosted a party in their New York City hotel room, the morning after which Nancy was found dead in the bathroom with a single stab wound to her abdomen. Despite being comatose on drugs the entire night and having zero recollection, Vicious admitted to the stabbing and was charged with her murder. Many believe that Nancy was actually killed by a drug dealer who was attempting to rob the drugged-up couple, and that Vicious was totally incapable of harming her considering the state he was in. But the bass player ended up dying of a drug overdose while out on bail before he could stand trial, and the case was closed. In 1996, Maryland woman Sharon Lapaka was killed in a bizarre case of consensual homicide. She had emailed dozens of men asking them to torture and kill her for mutual sexual gratification before meeting a man named Robert Glass who would follow through with her request. One morning, Sharon left her husband a note saying she would never return and told him not to track down her killer. Glass ended up strangling her to death and was soon arrested after police found the emails and discovered Sharon's body on his property. He admitted to fulfilling her torture fantasy, but also maintained that her death was an accident. Glass pled guilty and was sentenced to 3 to 5 years before dying of a heart attack while in prison. In 2013, double amputee and 4-time Paralympic gold medalist Oscar Pistorius shot his girlfriend 3 times through a locked bathroom door, claiming he mistook her for an intruder. During his murder trial, Pistorius removed his prosthetics and hobbled on his stumps, while apparently attempting to garner sympathy and a more lenient sentence. But the judge wasn't buying it and sentenced the athlete to 15 years in prison for murder. This is the skeleton of a female vampire pinned to the ground with a sickle across her throat to prevent her from returning from the dead. It was found during an archaeological dig at a 17th century cemetery in Poland. In the late 1800s, there is an urban legend about a demonic figure roaming around the Arizona deserts that killed multiple people. It turned out to be a feral camel with the decaying corpse of a male soldier strapped to its back, likely the tragic result of Jefferson Davis's attempt to create a camel division in the U.S. Army. Known for playing Thanos in Season 2 of Squid Game, actor Top is an actual rapper in the K-pop group Big Bang who fell out of the spotlight for several years. When he was serving his mandatory military service in 2017, Top was busted for marijuana use and suspended from his duty. A few days after being discharged, the rapper was found unconscious in police barracks after overdosing on Xanax. He had attempted to take his own life and spent nearly a week recovering in the hospital. As the Nazi regime gained power, actor Lionel Royce lost his job and began receiving death threats for being a Jew. So he took refuge in the Alps, grew a beard, and dyed all of his hair by bathing in diluted hydrogen. He then returned to Germany claiming to be a self-taught peasant actor, and was eventually praised by the Nazis as proof of superiority of Aryan blood. Colombian man Christian Montenegro, who claims to be engaged to a ragdoll, has revealed that his fiancée Natalia is pregnant with their 3rd child. He also shared his plans for a dream wedding with his beloved partner, with whom he already has a son and daughter. When questioned about his bizarre relationship, Montenegro replied, "If it weren't for the dolls, I'd be more alone than anyone. At least I have something." And Christian certainly isn't the first person to fall in love and start a family with a ragdoll. In 2022, Maravone Marias had an actual wedding ceremony with her ragdoll husband Marcelo that was attended by 250 people. But the woman has recently expressed serious doubt in their relationship after she caught her husband cheating on her with another woman at a local motel. A Russian YouTuber was recently sentenced to 6 years in a maximum security prison after he allegedly caused his pregnant girlfriend to die from hypothermia during a live stream. Known as Stas Reflay, the streamer reportedly forced his girlfriend onto a freezing cold balcony wearing nothing but her underwear. Sometime later, he pulled her back inside and appeared confused, saying, "Chat, she has no pulse, she's pale, she's not breathing." He then laid her lifeless body on the couch, opened up a bottle of liquor, and continued streaming for an additional 2 hours before authorities finally arrived. The streamer's actions were apparently part of a disturbing trend known as trash streaming that's popular in Russia, where streamers perform dangerous or degrading stunts for donations. According to reports, Stas was sent $1,000 by a viewer to watch him abuse his girlfriend. The 34-year-old only ended his stream after police entered his home and pronounced his girlfriend dead. In 1995, Johnny Depp saved Courtney Love's life after she overdosed outside of a nightclub in Los Angeles. He performed CPR and managed to revive her before paramedics arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Instead of flowers, people bring sticks to the 120-year-old grave of a dog named Rex. In the year 2000, a passenger on a Philippine Airlines flight hijacked the plane and robbed all the other passengers. He tried escaping using a homemade parachute, but was afraid to jump out and needed a flight attendant to push him. His parachute failed to open and he plummeted to his death while everyone else was unharmed. If Laverne accepts this man's proposal, he will make you the happiest woman on earth. a 2-year-old girl from Turkey was heard screaming from her backyard before neighbors rushed over to check on her. When they reached her, they found a bite mark on her lip and a 2-foot-long snake dead in front of her. She'd apparently been bitten by the snake and killed it by biting it back in revenge. Russian scientist Anatoly Bugorsky worked as a physicist on the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union. In 1978, he was checking a malfunctioning piece of equipment when one of the safety mechanisms failed, causing a high-energy proton beam to pass directly through his head. He reportedly saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but didn't feel any pain. The beam had burned through parts of his skin, bone, and the brain tissue underneath, causing the left half of his face to swell up beyond recognition. Since it was believed that he received far more than a fatal dose of radiation, Bugorsky was taken to a clinic in Moscow where doctors could document his certain death. But miraculously, Bugorsky survived, completed his PhD, and continued working as a particle physicist. Nearly 50 years later, he's still alive to this day with relatively minor symptoms. This is the skull of a young girl whose remains were found in the trash deposit of a Jamestown fort building in 2013. As evidenced by the butchery marks seen on her forehead, she was believed to be the victim of cannibalism at the Jonestown colony in the winter of 1609. Known as the starving time, this period was marked by extreme desperation when it came to finding food due to a severe drought. The governor of Jamestown, George Percy, wrote that colonists ate horses, dogs, cats, vermin, and even dug up corpses from graves to consume. In one case, he reported that a man killed his pregnant wife, butchered her, preserved her with salt, and consumed her. Only 61 out of the original 500 colonists managed to survive the brutal winter. Ira Hayes was a Native American Marine who was one of the men photographed raising the American flag over Iwo Jima in 1945. But despite national fame after the war, Hayes suffered from severe PTSD and descended deep into alcoholism. In January of 1955, he tragically ended up freezing to death while drunk in the Arizona desert. In 1958, the U.S. Air Force accidentally dropped a nuke on 4 kids playing in the woods of South Carolina. Thankfully, it didn't have its nuclear core installed yet, but still caused several injuries. Discovered at the age of 18, Susan Peters had a very successful acting career until she was shot during a hunting trip in 1945. Her husband's rifle accidentally fired into her spine, leaving her permanently paralyzed from the waist down. A few years later, one day Peters told her doctor, "I'm getting awfully tired. I think it would possibly be better if I just died." She then starved herself for the next few months until tragically dying from pneumonia at the young age of 31. In 1960, 12-year-old Howard Doley was given an unnecessary lobotomy because his stepmother wasn't able to handle a normal preteen boy. She took him to several doctors who said Howard was perfectly healthy and blamed his questionable behavior on her bad parenting. That was until Dr. Walter Freeman, the man who popularized the lobotomy, diagnosed him with schizophrenia and offered to scramble his brain. It took Howard decades to recover from the barbaric procedure, spending years of his life in institutions, prisons, as a homeless person, and an alcoholic. Howard eventually earned a college degree and wrote several memoirs about his lobotomy. In 2009, the body of a man with graying hair was found washed up on a beach in Sligo, Ireland. He'd been checked into a nearby hotel under the name Peter Bergman, and his movements were captured on security cameras throughout the town, but aside from this, very little is known about the man. He was found with most of his clothes left behind on the shore, with no wallet, money, or form of ID. It's not even clear how he died since there was no evidence of drowning or foul play, but the post-mortem showed that he had advanced stages of prostate cancer and bone tumors and was likely in significant pain before he died. One thing that's for certain is that the man traveled extensively to erase all evidence of his existence, as he still remains unidentified to this day. A 22-year-old woman from Ireland was recently left with severe internal injuries after her butt plug was pulled through her body during an MRI scan. She apparently believed she was safe to insert it before the procedure, believing the plug was made entirely of silicone. But it actually contained a metal core, causing it to react to the scanner's powerful magnets. She's expected to recover in the hospital, but this is why doctors always say you should never wear a butt plug while getting an MRI. In another ridiculous MRI case in 2023, a Brazilian lawyer tragically died after a scanner caused his gun to fire inside of the machine. After being repeatedly asked by doctors to remove all metal objects, Leandro Novaes decided not to reveal that he had a gun in his waistband, which ended up firing into his stomach. He spent several weeks in the hospital before succumbing to his costly bad decision. This case was a big reason why doctors always remind their patients to remove any firearms before receiving an MRI. Known as the girl who can't feel pain, Ashlyn Blocker was born with a congenital insensitivity to pain, a rare condition characterized by her body's inability to experience physical pain. While it may sound like a superpower, this condition has left Ashlyn without the natural warning signals that typically alert people to danger. From a young age, she accidentally injured herself countless times, forcing her parents to be constantly vigilant to prevent serious harm. In one case, she ran on a badly fractured ankle for several days before her parents finally realized that something was wrong. Here's a 1955 photo of actor James Dean pretending to sleep inside of an open casket at a furniture store in Indiana. After a fatal car crash just 7 months later, Dean would end up laying in a casket permanently. Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother, Alberta, was also murdered 6 years after her son was assassinated. She was shot and killed by a 23-year-old black man who thought that black civil rights activists and ministers were evil. The man yelled, "You are serving a false god," and shot Alberta King with 2 handguns while she was playing an organ during a church service in Atlanta. In the mid-2000s, Giancarlo Esposito was forced to declare bankruptcy since his acting career was failing. The father of 4 then considered hiring a hitman to murder him to provide the insurance money for his family. But shortly afterwards, he landed the role of Gus Fring on Breaking Bad, which completely turned his life around. In 2010, 2 women tried to smuggle their dead relative's body onto a flight by putting him in a wheelchair and giving him sunglasses. They were apparently trying to save the $3,000 it would have cost them to send his body back home. In 2016, a man who'd been continuously stalking Miranda Cosgrove apparently plotted to murder her. For 3 days, the stalker had been burying various weapons in Cosgrove's backyard, including knives and a rope. One day, he spent hours pacing around the area and eventually shot at a woman who looked like the iCarly actress. Earlier this year, inmates at a Miami prison managed to birth a child without ever even meeting each other face to face. 23-year-old Joanne DePaz and 29-year-old Daisy Link, both imprisoned for separate murder charges, started talking to each other through the air vents before falling in love and eventually wanting kids. Using a makeshift line made out of bedding, they passed Joanne's erectoplasm through the vents, while Daisy used a yeast infection applicator to inseminate herself. Against all odds, the plan worked, and the baby was born healthy. The pair are now in different prisons, while Joanne's mother is raising their baby girl. Earlier this year, 21-year-old Texas woman Juniper Bryson was charged with attempting to sell her newborn baby on Facebook. She agreed to sell her newborn to the highest bidder, but was only hoping for $200. Bryson was messaged by various people and told them she just needed enough money to pay for her DoorDash food and to move into a new apartment. She was reported to police by a couple she blocked on Facebook for asking if they could adopt her baby the legal way. Studies have shown that obese drivers are 80% more likely to die in a car accident than drivers who are not overweight. Earlier this year, 2 Brazilian influencers drowned during a yacht party after the boat was capsized by a massive wave. The women likely would have survived the tragedy had they worn life jackets, but reportedly didn't want to ruin their tans in selfies. If you were to remove all the blood vessels in your body and tie them together, they would stretch across the entire circumference of the earth 2 to 4 times. In 2023, a woman's leg became trapped at the end of a movable walkway at an airport in Thailand. Her leg was so deeply stuck that emergency crews had no choice but to amputate it below the knee in order to free her. She was quickly rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors were unable to reattach her leg. In 2004, 40-year-old Marion Carver set out on a week-long Alaskan cruise by herself. Just 2 days into the voyage, her steward noticed that she was missing, but was told by his supervisor to just do your job and forget about it. Therefore, the woman's disappearance went unreported, and at the end of the cruise, most of her belongings were allegedly disposed of. Carver was only reported missing by her father more than a week after she disappeared, when she never returned home from her trip. To this day, no trace of her has ever been found, as her fate remains a total mystery. In 1963, a stray tuxedo cat named Félicette became the first and only cat to go to space. She was launched by French scientists and spent 15 minutes in a rocket before returning to Earth. She was euthanized shortly afterwards so scientists could study her brain. In 1998, Polish college student Katarzyna Zawada went missing when she was supposed to meet up with her mom. A few months later, a tugboat suddenly stopped working because a pile of human skin got stuck in the propeller. When the remains were examined, it was determined that the skin was deliberately removed from the torso while the limbs and head were cut off. DNA testing soon linked it to the missing woman, and researchers eventually concluded that her murderer had been wearing her skin as a bodysuit. Cyclopia is a real congenital disorder marked by the failure of the embryo to properly divide the orbits of the eyes into two separate cavities, resulting in a single eye in the middle of the face. It's usually caused by a mutation in the Sonic the Hedgehog gene, real, and typically results in death within a few hours after birth. The tragic condition occurs in 1 out of every 200 miscarried fetuses, and the maximum recorded lifespan of a child born with cyclopia is 1 day. Following the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, people have been putting up wanted posters across New York City targeting other healthcare CEOs. The posters read, "Healthcare CEOs should not feel safe," after his 28-year-old teacher allegedly made creepy remarks to a 6th grade girl. A young student catfished the man and made him think he was talking to a 14-year-old girl. After receiving concerning messages from the teacher, the boy reported him to police, and he now faces charges of sexual exploitation. This 2022 photo shows 40-year-old Russian mother Anna Uskova moments before she jumped into a frozen river. She was apparently following a Christian Orthodox tradition of Epiphany and believed that jumping into the frigid water would rid her of sin. However, she jumped in at a bad angle and was quickly swept away by the powerful current, trapping her under the ice. Her husband immediately jumped in to rescue her while their children screamed in horror. But his efforts were unsuccessful and her body was recovered 10 days later. While investigating the illegal shark fin trade for the BBC special Gordon's Sharkbait in 2011, Gordon Ramsay and his crew were attacked by a group of men linked to drug networks in Costa Rica. They were held at gunpoint, doused with petrol, and told they would be killed if they continued filming. The shark fin trade continues to flourish to this day due to the high demand of shark fin soup, resulting in about 100 million sharks being killed every year. This was the obituary of Kathleen Demlow, who doesn't appear to be missed by her family. Here's a photo of Barbara Graham saying goodbye to her 2-year-old son Tommy before being executed via gas chamber in 1955. She was convicted for her part in the brutal murder of elderly widow Mabel Monahan during a home invasion gone wrong. In 1988, Hawaiian musician Israel Kana'i Kamakavivole called the owner of a recording studio at 3 a.m. when he was so eager to record his new idea. Despite having obviously closed for the night, the studio owner agreed since Israel was such a nice guy. Within 15 minutes, they recorded his ukulele rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow in just one take. Sadly, Israel struggled with morbid obesity throughout his life, at one point weighing over 750 pounds. After enduring several hospitalizations due to respiratory and cardiac issues, the legend would end up dying of respiratory failure at the young age of 38. A 71-year-old man from Africa has lived in total isolation for 55 years to stay away from women. At the age of 16, he locked himself into a home secured by a 15-foot fence to avoid any possible interactions with females. He reportedly suffers from gynophobia, an irrational fear of women. A 26-year-old mum from the UK has died after traveling to Turkey for a Brazilian butt lift. The official cause of death was a fat embolism after some of the injected fat apparently entered her bloodstream. Many health professionals consider BBLs to be barbaric procedures because of the significant health risks associated with them that are seldom discussed. In July of 1518, a French woman ran from her house and started dancing fervently in the street. Within a week, a few dozen others had joined her, and by the next month, hundreds fell victim to this dancing plague. They danced completely uncontrollably and seemingly without reason, often for days on end, until they collapsed from exhaustion or even died from heart attacks or strokes. Up to 400 people in total died before the phenomenon suddenly stopped. It's widely believed that the dancing plague was caused by stress-induced hysteria or poisoning from a wheat fungus called ergot. In 1994, 13-year-old Texas boy Nicholas Barkley went missing after playing basketball with some friends. 3 years later, he was found in Spain and reunited with his family, but something was very off. The boy who came back had darker hair, brown eyes instead of blue, and a French accent, while looking much older than Nicholas would have been at the time. But perhaps blinded by grief, the Barkley family accepted this boy without question despite these major differences. To be fair, he claimed his kidnappers had taken him to France, dyed his hair, and changed his eye color to hide his identity. But a private investigator would soon reveal the boy's true identity as Frederick Borden, a 23-year-old Frenchman with a history of impersonating missing kids. Borden had apparently been searching for love and affection that he never received as a child. Known as the Chameleon, he's assumed over 500 false identities throughout his life, including those of orphans. Meanwhile, the true fate of Nicholas Barkley remains unknown to this day.